I'm the party star. I'm popular. I've got my own car. I'm popular. I'll never get caught. I'm popular. I make football bets. I'm a teacher's pet. This is the Community Solutions Podcast. Jason Bradley, Andrew Richter, back here yet again, tearing it up. How you doing?
Well, I'm doing fine, even though winter's making a comeback here. I'm still doing okay. Once again, I'm blanking on our you know what I need with the opening song?
Yeah.
I need like the theme music behind it.
Yeah.
Because I think I could ring a bell if I got the theme music behind it.
Well, you might.
It might. Well, I got to be batting better than 020 or whatever I'm batting all time here. All right, I don't even have a guess. Enlighten us here on who that was.
Popular by a band called Nada Surf.
Nada Surf.
Yeah, one hit wonder out of the '90s, but entertaining song nonetheless.
I'll tell you what. Well, how bands get their names? I mean, it's just
Yeah.
Sir Mix-a-Lot or what else is out there?
I don't think he was
Biggie
a band.
Smalls.
I don't think he was a band either.
Okay.
I gotta laugh when I'm out playing music, and people say play something by name any rap artist. I'm like, or pop music nowadays. I'm like, I don't think there's any real instruments in that.
Pop music nowadays. I mean, I'll tell you what. The times of the garage bands, I always think of watching that movie, what the hell was it, with Tom Hanks was their manager. I can't think of it, but they were like The Thing You Do or something. I don't remember, but they were like a 60s
like
kind
that,
of thing. Yeah. Do the thing you do or something.
Yeah.
And I just thought, wow, a garage band that gets a song on a radio and but now it's just nobody appreciates the music aspect of it anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, I know you in your world with your underground stuff, it's a little different.
Yeah, there is a lot of really good stuff out there. I mean, I'll tell you.
Why don't I get to hear it ever?
Because that's not where the money is right now. You got
tired of listening to the Backstreet Boys or whatever's on radio now.
I don't think it's the Backstreet Boys.
Am I 20 years? Am I 20 years off again?
Something like that. Yeah,
right.
It's just crazy.
But I mean, I watched a snippet of the Country Music Awards. I used to be a big country fan. I don't know anybody. I mean, I don't know. To me, country is Johnny Cash. It's Merle Haggard. It's I liked Garth Brooks a lot when he was big.
Yeah.
That's country to me. I don't know who. I can't even think of their names. The only person I recognized there was Reba McEntire. So that tells you where I am, which is not a surprise to any of the regular listeners here.
Right. Well, that's all right. But, just to switch gears for a moment, I had recently seen...
So not a Smurf. Okay.
That's okay. Not a surf, yeah. And not a NADA, yeah.
Well, of course not. They freed the serfs a long time ago.
Right.
Of course you're not a surf.
Yeah, absolutely. That's exactly what they meant.
NOTA, not a surf.
SERF, yes. That's exactly it. You got it. Oh, my goodness.
I knew I'd figure out where they got that name. It's what? Russia. Alexander II. Yeah, there you go.
And why wouldn't they?
Yeah, no doubt about it.
Unfortunately, I think... Well, this is a discussion for another day, but, music used to be this revolutionary thing to stand up to power. Well, some of it was. And really, those people just turned out to be Democrats when they got older, and they really weren't that revolutionary. But that's neither here nor there.
Enough about Crosby, Stills, and Nash,
well,
okay?
that's just about any of them, Green Day or anything else. I'm sorry, but...
Yeah. But see, I was never a fan of that alternative stuff, so,
You're right. That's fine. Over the weekend, I had seen the Unplanned movie. It was really good.
You planned to see Unplanned?
I did actually plan in advance. Yes.
Okay, Jay.
Yeah.
Now I've heard about this movie.
Okay.
But what is it exactly? What's the synopsis about there for people who want to go and watch it?
All right. Well, Abby Johnson became. She started volunteering at a Planned Parenthood, and caught the eye of the director there, was brought up through the ranks to become the youngest director ever. When her boss went then to Houston to be a bigger director.
Got promoted and up the ranks.
Yeah, and then Abby even won like the National Director of the Year award or something like that. But then got called in to help with an abortion, and she had never actually been in the room to help assist with
an actual abortion.
An ultrasound-led abortion, and so with that, they can see the baby right there. You know, and it's supposed to be safer for the mother because when they do it that way. But the thing is, it's not safer for the baby, obviously. So she had never seen one like this before, and then so what happened is that. It mortified her so much because she watched the baby fight for its life on this sonogram, and it's like this baby has to be alive, and she changed like that to be a pro-life advocate and fight against Planned Parenthood. That's the basic synopsis, and so it was really well done.
So I'm sure she's vilified for that and so on and so forth.
Oh, yeah. Planned Parenthood took her to court and lost.
Took her to court for what? Defamation or something?
Yeah, because they didn't like what she was saying, and they lost. But
good.
Yeah, absolutely. But ever since then, a lot of the reviews have been really bad from the critics, although, like, the viewer reviews have been really good, and in fact, what a shock! Hollywood,
you know what's happening in Georgia right now with the
heartbeat law,
heartbeat law, and the reaction to that.
Absolutely, but even like on this, if you're to just go right into like Yahoo, I mean, who uses Yahoo versus Google, but whatever. What they have an Amazon ad at the top. Then you can. The next one is to find full movies online at some pirate site, right? Then supposedly it lists showtimes near Minneapolis, Epic Theaters in Titusville, Florida is the top one. So
there's a whole campaign out there to make sure people don't see this.
And then the next two, are stories about what the movie gets wrong about abortion, even though this is based on a book written by Abby Johnson, she was in the industry. It's not inaccurate at all. This is a true story.
It goes to show you got to see who you're going in bed with before you put your name out to something. I mean, especially on an issue like that, which is so. I mean, I don't know. Abortion saddens me. I think the casualness to which life is treated nowadays is scary. Mm-hmm. I mean, it just is scary when you think about. What's happened to the modern day family. It's a discussion for another day, but I mean, just to think, what is it? 40 million abortions in the United States since Roe v. Wade or something like that.
It's way too many.
It's incredible when thought of.
Yep, and as a small L libertarian, a freedom-loving, type person, this is where a lot of my liberty lovers get it wrong. A lot of them have come down on the side of, liberty of the mother. She should have the right to choose what goes on with her body. But as a libertarian, are you comfortable being the one that says, yes, this is where life begins, or no, this is not where life begins? My guess is no from a libertarian point of view. Yeah. So are you comfortable with somebody else choosing that if indeed it's possible that there's life? Because one of the main objectives of liberty is life, freedom, and pursuit of property or happiness. Mm-hmm. And so if indeed there is a chance that there is a life there, are you comfortable with you or anyone else setting that point where life begins.
Well, I also think there's a misconception that this is religious based.
No.
That oh, you're pro-life, you're just a Bible thumping, But and for me, my position has been that that life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness comes ahead of anybody's religion. That I don't care what religion. I don't think that's why the pro-life movement. I think some religions groups have tried to hijack it, but for me, I've always come down on the you wouldn't treat a dog the way you treat unborn children. We wouldn't treat bats the way we treat unborn children.
Yeah.
And to say unborn children have no rights, which is basically the position of the, I always call it the pro-abortion crowd, not the pro. Cause I'm pro-choice, okay, about everything except abortion. Everything else I'm pro-choice on. I'm
Right.
pro-market,
Yeah.
pro-freedom. When it comes to life, I'm not pro-choice. So to say that an unborn child has no rights and the fathers of unborn children have no rights is a position I can't find defensible.
No, absolutely not. In fact, I've always said it this way, and here's another libertarian type argument. Libertarians are always against a higher form of government pressing down on a lower form of government. In our eyes, the individual comes above the family, the state, local, federal, all of that, as far as when it comes to individual rights.
Yeah, individual comes ahead of groups.
And when, your limits are obviously when your freedom encroaches on the freedom of others, that's your limit, right? So in the abortion debate, what we're really looking at is the tyranny of family-level government over the rights of an individual or individual-level government.
I can see that. Absolutely. Never thought of it that way.
Yeah, I don't know if a lot of people have, but that is why,
it's just, I know it's just an issue I'm just ashamed of. I don't know how to put it nicely. I mean, I don't know where it goes in the future. I think that there was a time that I thought that abortion would never be overturned in this country, but I think a pendulum has swung back a little bit. I think one side's gotten so extreme in it, and the left has done what they always do. They give it a new name. It's not abortion. It's reproductive rights.
Yeah.
It's like it's not welfare. It's assistance.
Right.
It's not. Whatever they come up with, they come up with some name to call it. So that they got from some think tank or some George Soros funded focus group, and that's how they say it's not global warming. It's climate change. It's how they've learned. It's a marketing thing, like Frank Luntz always says.
Right.
So when I hear reproductive rights, I even more cringe because it takes away the word that gets the side charging. And so reproductive rights, well, what the hell does that mean? Then they lump everything else in with it. Birth control and sex ed in school and the right to privacy, which has nothing to do with having an abortion. No. Nothing whatsoever. What's No,
that just allows for 11-year-old girls to get them without parental consent.
Yeah, it's a red herring in there. Yeah, without parental consent, even though they can't smoke till they're 21.
Right.
Makes a lot of sense.
Well, at any rate,
I
encourage everybody to go see the movie and support it while it's still in theaters. It's playing at a number of places all around the cities. Plymouth Grand 15, AMC Arbor Lakes, Champlain, blah, 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 blah. You can find it. Unplannedtickets.com will show you everywhere it's playing. So
cool.
Yeah, I encourage you while it's still out there and support it because it got an R rating, which I want to say too, and it's politically motivated. The MPAA decided that they didn't want people to see it, didn't want their
especially
kids,
young people to see it.
Yeah, they didn't want people to take their kids to see it. And really, we're dealing with about a 20-second scene where there's a sonogram image of a baby, going through this whole abortion, and it shows it fighting, and it's intense. But at best, this is a PG-13 movie, so please take your kids to.
Sounds like it's going to give me nightmares.
Yeah.
I mean,
it's an uplifting movie. Overall.
Look, I'm not a parent, but I view children as a blessing.
They are,
and so it's just anyhow. All right.
Yeah.
Jay, I got to say something.
Okay.
I met Joe Biden today. Did I tell you that?
No.
Yeah, he blew on my neck. No, I'm just kidding. It's
my goodness,
Mr. Biden yet to officially jump in.
right?
But has jumped in other ways now. Being attacked very harshly. Mr. Biden leads into a little bit what we're going to talk about here. We're going to keep you in suspense for another 5 minutes or so. But Mr. Biden being attacked very hard by the left during this little melee where he's gotten in somebody's comfort zone, or he's, I don't know, patted somebody on the back. I don't know what he's being accused of. And I mean, and let's focus on something here. Isn't there a difference? I mean, am I just already an old fogey, or am I? I mean, the whole
say that.
The whole idea of Biden's being treated like he's being guilty of sexual assault, or I mean, the hubbub. I sit back and laugh at it because it's the Democrats fighting with each other for the most part. Cory Booker's been accused of this, by the way, and it has not made the news very much.
Right.
Boy, I pity the woman that happens to. But, Mr. Biden is being attacked a lot by people to his left. What do we make of the former vice president's? And he's doing the dumbest thing he could do, which is just endlessly go on an apology tour. Because we know at the left it'll never be good enough. He's just going to grovel to these people forever. And I think it's pathetic to watch an old guy wearing his Depends groveling to everybody for forgiveness. Biden should just say, "Look, I didn't commit a crime. I didn't do anything. I'm just one of those guys who likes to be close to people. Probably does it to guys too. How many times he hug Obama? And I thought there was a fire hydrant nearby. I mean, come on, what's? I mean, okay, I'm sorry I made somebody uncomfortable. Nobody said anything, obviously, at the time. And to me, the longer another woman's going to come out in a week. Another's going to come out in 2 weeks. Yep. This is going to never end. The stupidest thing he can do is what he's doing. It doesn't surprise me Biden's doing that, because he just talks and talks until diarrhea comes out. But I mean, what's going on here? What do you make? Because, Jay, you and I always see a political end to something. I always, when all the other candidates are basically reading from the same script, it tells me a talking points memo went around. What's going on here with these far left people going after Mr. Biden?
Well, he is, even without putting his hat in the ring yet, he is the front runner. And so the front runner is obviously going to get more flack. That's a big part of it.
Somebody's got to take him down.
Oh, yeah. That's part of it. He is cut from a different cloth. He is not a socialist, per se, even though he is pretty far left. He's no John F. Kennedy.
Yeah, when Biden's the most moderate candidate of the bunch, this is But you're right. He's not a socialist.
He's not a socialist, but he's no Grover Cleveland.
Right, but I mean, is this an effort of the? Because I try to picture myself as being, if you're a 24-year-old socialist, pretty hard to look at Joe Biden as your champion. Forget the fact he's going to be 78 years old. But is it kind of hard to look at him as the champion of some new? No. I think he's ahead for what it's worth because of name ID. I mean, look, he's a former vice president, okay, and he was in the Senate since Jimmy Carter. I mean, he's there a long. I think 5 terms. I think he served. He was there a long time, and if you're a young, Elizabeth Warren supporter or something or whatever, whoever they can. I don't even know. I don't even care. I'm already ready to cast my vote anyway. Do you look at Biden as, okay, this is if you look at, he's got a long record and he comes with all the handicaps that somebody who's been in politics for 35, 40 years has. I mean, this is a guy who voted for the Defense of Marriage Act. He voted against the Kyoto Treaty.
Yeah.
He voted for the Iraq War. He voted for the Patriot Act. He voted against desegregating buses back in the 70s. I mean, if that means anything, but that's way out of step with the Democratic Party today. So it was liberal for the time, but it was way out of whack with where they are now. So how do you assess where the vice president is right now? I think the reason he's ahead is two things. One, name ID. Two, the feeling that a far left person can't beat President Trump.
Oh, they can't.
I know. Well, you and I know that. But I mean, I think there's enough pragmatic Democrats out there who look at the electoral map, which we're going to get to in a second.
Right.
And look at Pennsylvania and Wisconsin and Iowa and, well, we know the states, Ohio and North Carolina, and go, how in the world is Kamala Harris going to win these states? And says, okay, if beating President Trump is the solution, if that's really what we're after, if it's not about 100% about ideology, and I think that's where but I think he can only go down from here. That's my guess, but it's
probably, it's still early. He may or may not even run. I know some articles have surfaced lately about his ties to getting his son aid or getting him some contracts in the Ukraine and in China, where he didn't really know anything about the business he was getting contracted to do. We'll keep an eye on it. But, I mean, there are things that we need to take a look at and just kind of wait and see how they play out,
Yeah, he's going to get the anal exam pretty hard.
Oh, boy.
He'll never stop talking then. Yeah, I'll tell you, when Joe Biden's the most sane candidate, boy.
Yeah.
That's pretty rough, I'll tell you. And I think their chances of defeating the president are dwindling by the day.
Yeah.
But, anything could happen. I mean, the president's an enigma.
Yes.
He's not a guy you can apply conventional wisdom to. So, we'll see. I mean, if I'm the president, I'm doing one thing every day, 10 times a day.
Yeah.
That's talking about the economy.
Yes.
Because the economy is his ticket to anything he wants. But he's got to harp and harp and harp and harp on it day after day after day after day. And let me ask one other question really quick.
Yeah.
Why is there no mention of Mr. Biden's age? The first, with all due respect, I know President Trump is 71 or something like that, 72 maybe. I think his birthday's in June. But the first election I ever voted in, Jay, that I've mentioned this on the show before, was 1996. Dole against Clinton. And half the campaign, maybe more than that, was spent talking about Bob Dole, and I would argue mocking his age. He was about 72 at the time. And he had a physical disability, I think, that made him look older and more frail, I thought, too. But there was a clear generation gap there. And his age became such... I remember him getting asked about it at debates. And it's kind of like, why is there no discussion? Bernie Sanders will be 79. Joe Biden will be 78. Nobody brings up their age ever. I'm not saying that they should disqualify them. But I'm saying, why doesn't anybody bring up, you have 8 years, Mr. Sanders, you'll be 87 years old. And the average American male, you've already lived past their average length. I mean, President Reagan faced a lot of that when he ran.
Right.
His age was a big, different generation, but his age was a big deal.
Right. Well, even in 2008, 2012.
John McCain faced it.
McCain, but Ron Paul as well.
Yes.
And they tried to disqualify him on his principles, and when he was only gaining more momentum, they turned to his age. He's too old. He's going to be 72. Yeah. He's too
Throw
old.
a dart at a board and see what happens.
So... age seems to be a recurring factor, but not when it's...
Not on the other side.
On the other side,
like. Okay, well, we mentioned the Electoral College for a reason, and you might say, well, why would we talk about that? on a local show because everything has local ramifications.
Yes, it does.
And it's very ignorant to look at. We're going to talk today about removing this movement to get rid of the Electoral College. And I'll use the term trickle down. Okay, I use that term. Trickle down effect that would have on the rest of the country, particularly rural small towns, counties, their governments, their populations. Don't think for a minute that only affects a presidential race.
Right.
It will affect where all the money goes, where all the candidates go. It has a big effect than you could possibly imagine, getting rid of the Electoral College.
Yes.
Jay, first, to those of you who, you people under 30 out there who probably never heard of the Electoral College until you voted for the first time.
And no, they don't offer scholarships. I just want to put that out there right now.
No. Yeah, I think AOC tried to get into the Electoral College. It was rejected. But why we have an Electoral College. Jay, let's just spend a second.
Yeah, let's go back in history to the writing of the Constitution and piece this out.
Yes, and again, if you're under 30, you're probably hearing this for the first time. People forget, and I think it's stepped over a lot in American history, the Articles of Confederation.
Right.
That the Constitution was not how we governed ourselves first after winning independence. And the problems of representation that brought on. Each state got one vote. Remember that?
Yeah.
There was no president. There was no... that was the way large states and small states were represented the same. So the Constitution, we're skipping over a few things.
Right. At the point, there were only 13 states as well. So.
They all had different currencies. It was, they all acted like independent countries. So the Constitutional Convention came about to try to fix all this stuff without destroying people's liberty and creating a tyrannical government.
Right.
So that was, that was the whole main goal. And the compromise, and you can go back and look at the Virginia Compromise, and there were other variations of this, was to take the legislative branch and to separate it into two parts. You'd have direct representation in the House. You'd have equal state being represented equally, I should say, in the Senate. And of course, they were elected by the legislatures at that time, and were for the next 120 whatever years until 1913.
Until they messed that up.
Yeah. Yep, we screwed that up after a while. So the theory behind it is that nothing could become law without the consent of the people and the states. It was meant to be difficult to pass a law, not easy. The presidency was a unique thing. You got to remember, this is a time of monarchies and to have one executive that could veto legislation and things like that was a pretty unique concept that was not seen as a divine ruler. Some could argue, and I would agree with this, that President Washington could have assumed that role had he wanted to.
Absolutely.
And we owe a lot to him that he didn't do that.
Yeah. To
the bewilderment of King George III. But, his retirement and the transfer of the presidency to John Adams is a complete lost step, in my opinion, in American history.
Absolutely.
And his transition to Jefferson, to an opposite party.
Absolutely. Because then when you look ahead to the Great Depression and you have FDR who runs for and gets a third term, you have a Democrat majority in the legislature that passes that amendment to the Constitution limiting a president to 2 terms because they didn't like it either.
Yeah. Well, yeah, there wasn't a conspiracy by the Republicans.
No.
Where have I heard that? No. Yeah, but the whole precedence of that being set. So, the Electoral College was set up to indirectly elect a president that would be president for all of the country, not just. I mean, they were very concerned about. I don't want to say not trusting the popular vote. That's not the way to put it.
Yeah.
That you didn't want the big states running everything, and if everything was all about the popular vote, it would have undone all of the House and Senate work.
Yeah.
In other words, if you had the president being elected by the popular vote, at some point they realized it would squeeze out the small states in picking a president.
Right.
And so we have preserved that ever since President Washington's election. There is a movement now. I would say it actually started in the 60s with Birch Bayh and a few other people. President Carter actually gave some tacit support to it later.
Yeah.
It didn't go anywhere, but I mean, there's this movement to get rid of the Electoral College and let Los Angeles, Chicago, and New York pick our president every year is gaining steam. In a lot of areas, we are not surprised that it's gaining steam.
Absolutely.
And naturally, of course, they don't want to amend the Constitution like they were supposed to.
Yes.
No, we're not going to do that.
Well,
No, we're going to create
why would we do that? No, it's ridiculous. And maybe we should explain a little bit how the Electoral College works for people.
Yes,
For your
getting an
parties.
elector.
Yes. So each state is allowed a certain number of electors. These people are the ones that actually vote for the president. You as a person, an individual, you're voting for the president, but not really. What you're doing is you're voting for a president, and based on who wins, that party has chosen through an election themselves that number of electors, and then that number of electors get to cast their ballot for whoever they want, so long as they're not bound by state law. Where there's a few states where that's the case.
I think there's actually almost a majority that they are bound by party.
Yeah. But there are a few that are not bound by party. But the winner, that party sends their electors to the actual electoral election, and they cast their votes.
Which is like a week or two before Christmas, actually.
Yes.
And we should explain. For example, it's sort of by elector. So, for example, if you live in, say, I live in Congressional District 3.
Yes.
For the 2020 election, the Republicans will elect someone to be that elector.
Yes.
Now, that elector, if the president wins Minnesota, has the right to cast that. That elector casts that ballot.
Right.
So if President Trump wins Minnesota, whoever the CD3 Republicans have elected as the elector gets to cast that vote. Now, in Minnesota, they're not bound. And a lot of states, like you said, in a lot of states they are. There's other states, Washington, they're not bound. Hawaii, they're not. Texas, they're not. I'm trying to think of some states that West Virginia.
But ideally, because the state
They won't be
party-
reelected to their post. if
the
they
state
do.
party convention will elect those electors, and so they ideally know who they're putting up.
Most
So,
of the time.
most
they
of
do,
the time.
yeah. So, yes. So that's that is how that works, and I do think there's a lot of people who don't get it, who don't understand what
Right.
that means.
That's why we are a democratic republic and not a democracy,
democracy, yes.
because we elect people to represent us to go do.
we elect,
ABC.
we
Yeah.
elect people to elect. If you elect people up, it's kind of like the caucus system, which is under attack as well. Which I think there's pros and cons too. Again, that's a topic for another day. So yeah, but the ignorance about the Electoral College is quite striking to me. How so few people know how it works.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll admit I didn't know how it worked till I got involved.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't understand it either. And I didn't understand.
I didn't either.
I didn't understand what a faithless elector was, or anything like that. So it's surprising, the ignorance. Now, off the air, Jay, you and I talked about if there was an electoral college here in the state of Minnesota. and what that might look like as far as
Yes.
electing statewide offices now, didn't we?
Yes.
That if you had, I don't know how you divide Minnesota up. I don't know if you do it by CDs, or you probably have to do it smaller than that. If there were 30 electoral votes, I suppose you have to have an odd number. But in Minnesota regionally, what would happen? And Minnesota was represented equally everywhere. I mean, the whole point is everybody in every corner has some say,
Right.
in the government, which it's kind of questionable whether they do in Minnesota today.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen the Twin Cities push the rest of the state around when it comes to
Completely.
things like the election of Al Franken and other elections like that, where they've kind of had their way at pushing the people that they want.
Yeah, I mean, if one little area can dominate the state, I mean, and leave the rest of the state behind, it'd be interesting to see some of the elections, all the close elections we've had over the last 30 years here. I mean, you pick any of them from congressional race. Well, I guess congressional races wouldn't count, but statewide races have been, other than last year, have been. I mean, I wonder if Doug Wardlow would have won an electoral vote in Minnesota to be attorney general. But but I think of the Dayton Emmer election. I think of even Governor Pawlenty's reelection, the Jesse Ventura election, where nobody probably would have won a majority. What would have happened then? Interesting to think about.
Right.
But I want to talk a little bit about the effect that national popular vote would have on the nation and the small, especially the small states and rural towns, because that's the backbone of our show is local government. And you think about all the localities, and you think about that. You think the federal government, like it or not, does a lot of stuff.
Oh yes,
And those resources get distributed very politically. It's not quite clear or fair how these things get done. But how many interstate highway dollars do you think are going to go to Iowa or something if there's no electoral college, or
right.
something? You pick a state like that, a swing state where nobody would stop.
Yeah.
The first caucus state. I'll just use Iowa. It's a good example. And nobody would visit without those, what was it, 7 electoral votes, meeting quite a bit. I mean, how much is at stake for Iowa if something like that gets lost?
Yeah, a lot, we all know and we've heard and we've seen all about the pork that comes out of Washington.
Yeah.
And if there's no need to buy people off,
Sure. I mean,
all that money's going to go where they do need to buy people off.
think of other things too, like where military bases are and where, how about all of our national parks and stuff that, what would the country look like if, there's I've said this before, there's a war on rural America.
Right.
Wouldn't the end result of this, and it may take 50 or 100 years to happen, that everybody is herded into a city or a suburb or a metropolis or whatever you want to call it? Isn't that going to be the end result?
Yeah.
You'll have a few yahoos, living out at Ruby Ridge, okay, and
Yeah.
Mount Carmel or whatever. I don't need whatever.
Yeah.
But aren't you ultimately freezing out anybody who doesn't live in a huge metropolis?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the Electoral College right now is based on population. It's a more fair way to distribute it.
Yeah.
But you look like at a state like California that has 55 versus a state like South Dakota that has 3 electors. You look at a state like Florida, which has 29, versus a state like Idaho that has 4. So again, California, New York, which has 29,
And dropping.
Yeah, and dropping. They're all going to Florida.
Texas.
And Texas. Texas has 38. Those are your really four biggest. Pennsylvania's not far behind at 20. But most of your other states do have a lot less.
Illinois, I want to say, has something like
Yeah, they have 20 as well.
Yeah.
Ohio has 18, Michigan 16,
And
North
dropping.
Carolina's 15. So, yeah.
But isn't that part of the point we've tried to make? Is the Electoral College is set up? Your electors are based on population. So why would the national popular vote? Why is that a better system?
Because
Is it all about who wins and loses?
Yes, and here's the crazy thing. I mean, in the history of elections, the national popular vote has not reflected the will of the electors, three times? It's been very few.
I want to say
it's been a little more than that.
1876, 1888.
Yep.
If you can count 1824.
Yeah.
And then 2000 and 2016.
Yeah.
The only time.
Okay, 5, yeah.
But see, isn't that like a 9-7 team winning the Super Bowl? It happens here and there, but
Yeah.
it's not a reason to blow the system up. The next year, a team that goes 14-2 wins it, and we're all back to,
Right. Well, the thing is, and this is mainly being pushed by Democrats, not completely, and we'll get into that later.
We got our.
But this is mainly being pushed by Democrats because the last couple
After
of times,
2016, mostly.
Right. The last couple of times it's happened, the national popular vote favored the Democrat. And they know that if they can win the cities, that they're probably never going to be out of power again.
Yeah, and let's keep in mind that's all big cities that they want.
Yeah.
Not just the big cities in blue states.
Right. And that's it.
Go down to Houston or Austin, Texas.
Absolutely.
Tell me who's winning down there.
Yeah.
Where do you think Robert Francis O'Rourke hangs around?
Yeah.
Think he's up on the panhandle? No.
Oh, no.
So,
No.
yeah.
No, and you'll have cities like St. Louis where Missouri will usually go conservative. St. Louis probably will not.
Right. States like Nevada, there's 2 blue counties in the whole state.
Atlanta, Georgia will probably go to the Democrat. And so you sway things so radically in the favor of the Democrats in most cases, just because we are becoming more polarized.
And you're adding immigration and things on top of that.
Right.
Where are they clustering? The cities.
Right. And if you can get them the right to vote, which they're trying to do,
right.
It's a bygone conclusion.
Yeah, not to mention Bernie Sanders trying to get people to vote from jail.
Yeah.
Yeah, here's your jailhouse shorts and stuff. By the way, here's a register to vote card.
We baked your ballot into the Jell-O. Fill it out in secret and pay the guard $20 to get it over to the.
Yeah. So I mean, but the thing, the whole movement is so dishonest to me because first let me say one thing. Let me say one factual thing about 2016 in particular. President Trump spent a lot of time trying to tip 3, 4, 5 states.
Yeah.
Okay, you took the Romney states and had to add 5 or whatever I don't remember all the differences.
Yeah.
It was Ohio because Romney won North Carolina, so it was Ohio, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Florida. I think were the 5 that flipped. And he spent a tremendous amount of time and money there. Had there been the national popular vote, how many trips to Wisconsin do you think President Trump would have made? Not very
0.
many. Maybe when he wanted some milk and cheese, on the campaign trail. Yeah. He spent a lot of time in if he's from New York, he certainly would have spent time there. He'd have spent time in Chicago. There's a Trump Tower in Chicago. I walked by it last summer. He would have spent time in those areas. He'd have campaigned differently than he did. So to say the same result would have happened is dishonest. And where are you morons in the media pointing this out? You let these folks get away with saying this BS. Same thing happened in 2000. With all due respect, President Bush, governor then, spent all that time in Florida, in Ohio, in the states he had to have, and it didn't matter how much he lost New York by.
Right.
So who's to say what would have happened in either one of those elections? How do we have any idea? How you go back to, take the popular vote back in 1912. Did that reflect the majority of the country there, Jay? Yeah, I don't think so. So how would the popular vote have been better then? And none of these people have won a majority. It's always a plurality.
Right.
I think Sam Tilden might have been the one. I think he got 50% of the vote in 1876, going back a ways.
Yeah.
Okay, if you want to go back 140 years. So, I mean, it's not like it's not like Al Gore and Hillary Clinton were the second comings of Abe Lincoln here. So, I mean, But my bigger concern is what nobody's talking about. It's the death of rural America. It's the freezing out of people who aren't in the big cities. It's the fact that they're never going to share in the I hate to say benefits of government, because, like it or not, government's doing what they're doing. How is that ever going to? How are we ever going to have smaller government if everybody is always crammed up in a city with their mass transit and their all the crap that goes on in these cities like Minneapolis?
Absolutely. So if we take a look here at this movement a little bit, since that's kind of the what we're talking about here, there's a couple different websites you can look at. One is nationalpopularvote.com. The other one is fairvote.org.
Yeah, a lot of those people are pushing ranked choice voting, too.
Absolutely. Anything to destroy our current election system, because obviously National Popular Vote doesn't take care of securing the vote at a state, a local level. But we have talked about that in a previous podcast. But this one's more around the Electoral College. Mm-hmm. But it does seep into the local stuff. And what they're trying to do is get the number of electoral votes that they would need to elect a president to sign onto a compact, the National Popular Vote Compact.
So they're using the Electoral College to get rid of it.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And so you've got
something I'd come up with.
Yeah, this compact has been enacted into law in 15 jurisdictions with 189 electoral votes.
What do you mean it's been enacted into law?
State legislatures have passed it and governors have signed it. In California,
meaning that they are going to, but those states
they will not. Yeah,
they don't all have binding over the electors.
Right.
So how in the world can Washington do this when they don't bind electors to? It's symbolic. Let's just call it what it is. This is a game.
Well, they're hoping that
that
they will be able to. Whoever, they're basically saying that they will throw all of their electors behind whoever wins the popular vote,
which is not their job. That's not the elector's job.
No, it's not.
So if the Republican wins California and loses the popular vote, they're going to send all the votes to the. I mean,
they seem to think that they can do this without amending the Constitution, which I argue. I don't think you can. But I mean, you've got these states trying it. So far, 189 electoral votes. California, Colorado, Connecticut, District of Columbia, Delaware, Hawaii, Illinois, Massachusetts, Maryland, New Jersey, New Mexico, New York, Rhode Island, Vermont, Washington. You have the bill. A bill has been passed in one house in 8 states with 72 electoral votes. Now, that doesn't necessarily, I don't know if that means that it's still working through the other house. I don't know, or the Senate or whatever, I don't know if it's just been shot down. It doesn't say here. But that's Arkansas, Arizona, Maine, Michigan, North Carolina, Nevada, Oklahoma, and Oregon. Not all Democratic states.
No, but like you said, just because a bill has been brought and talked about doesn't really mean anything. I'm guessing that bill in Arkansas and Oklahoma isn't going to go too far. And
I don't know, past one house. I hope it doesn't.
It passed one house?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Because every state is set up slightly differently.
Yeah. In
California,
Arizona,
for example, has an assembly.
Right.
It's not quite the same. You were saying about
in Arizona, the Arizona House, which is Republican controlled, it's 40-16. It passed, and in Oklahoma, it was the Senate that passed it 28-18.
That's discouraging.
Yeah, and it has moved out of committee into Republican-controlled states with 26 electoral votes, Georgia and Missouri. And there are a number of other bills on the table in other states that have not passed it yet. So,
well, it's funny, you're not hearing much coverage of this.
no,
I mean, I know the latest Trump tweet is pretty much all that the Communist News Network cares about. But I mean, is this more than symbolic then?
well, yeah.
Are you telling me Missouri is going to cast their vote for which President Trump won by like 16 points? You telling me they're going to cast their vote for the Democrat if he wins it and doesn't win the popular vote?
If they sign on, yeah. I don't know, or they're going to try, and I don't know what kind. I imagine that if this has enough weight behind it, enough electoral votes to be able to sway the election, that it's going to have to go through the Supreme Court before the next election. I would guess. In Minnesota here, the bill numbers are HF 1941, and or there's a couple of them. Actually, yeah, those are the newest ones here. There's an omnibus election bill, HF 1603, which is in House Committee. National Popular Vote bill is in that.
Yeah, of course, with 30 other things.
Right. And yeah, HF 1941 was what was introduced, and then looks like the Senate version is SF 34.
And who are our friends supporting that? Does it say on there who's our buddies?
Representative John Lesh introduced the National Popular Vote bill into the House, and Senator Charles Weiger introduced it into the Senate. Also, Senators Rest and Weiger introduced a similar bill, SF 189.
Oh, nice to know Ann Rest.
Yeah, absolutely.
Still alive. Well, and like you said, I mean, there are people on the left who favor the Electoral College, and there are people on the right who favor the National Popular Vote. And some of them are pretty powerful people.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not just, I don't want to call it fringe, but it's mainstream Republicans who've bought into this.
Absolutely.
Particularly here in Minnesota. I mean, do we want to name names?
Yeah.
Well,
I think so. You got to know who you're voting for.
It's disappointing. I used to work for one of them. That's Tom Emmer.
Right.
And, I mean, I have heard him talk about it, and I have just shook my head saying, what is he thinking?
Yep. But all y'all up in six, you don't run anybody. You don't try to primary them. I mean, we like Tom.
Right. I mean, Tom is good on most issues.
We like Tom, but
this is an issue that this isn't some tax cut or some spending proposal out, and this is a big deal.
Yeah.
I mean,
if this gets passed and enacted, I mean, Green New Deal happens.
Yes.
We're back in the Paris Accords, or worse.
No doubt about
it. Higher taxes.
President Trump won by part of that was the backlash of stuff like that. No doubt about it. I mean, go into Pennsylvania with the Green New Deal. That's why I say President Trump's in pretty good shape right now, because, I mean, he doesn't even have to do anything. Anyhow,
Right.
different subject, but, I mean, some other people here in Minnesota.
Karen Housley.
Yeah, I was going to mention her. Somebody, and I didn't mention this on our, partly because I was so wrong in all my predictions on the primary last year, that I didn't mention that I didn't vote for her in the primary.
Yeah.
I'll say I did in November with some hesitation.
Right.
But I'm shocked how this didn't even come up when she was running. I had to hunt to find that she had signed on to that in the Minnesota Senate. She's still there. I didn't know. I mean, nobody made this an issue. Nobody. I don't remember her making it an issue. it was very quiet.
It was.
And another guy who I used to have quite a bit of respect for is our former Speaker of the House, Kurt Zellers,
Yeah.
who had come out in favor of this as well. And you'd think a guy who was Speaker of the House and understood that legislative process and would be more with it than that. Laura Broad is another one, a former legislator that I used to really like. She was really good on a lot of issues, and she used to debate on that issue and did a very good job, little feisty thing, and she has come out in favor of this as well. And you just kind of sit there and wonder. I mean, how do people who claim to follow the Constitution and talk about our founding and limited government and being a republic and all that, especially people who represent a more rural area, how do they come out in favor of getting rid of the Electoral College? How could Karen Housley live? Where does she live? Is it in 8?
Yeah, I think so.
It's up 35 a bit. How does she think the Electoral College is going to benefit where she's at?
I don't know. It doesn't, because most of that area is pretty conservative, minus Duluth and the Iron Range.
Well, and even that aside, I mean, like we said, the drowning out, the death of rural America, which is, I am telling you, people can call me a conspiracy theorist all you want. It is out there that people take up too much land, they have too much freedom, and we've got to cram them in so we can control them.
Right. Yeah, she represents Forest Lake area.
Okay, so it's a little bit out of town.
Not much, but yeah, a little bit.
So, Tom Emmer was out from Delano. I mean, I don't know. It just kind of, it's disappointing. And like I said, I've always been a big fan of Tom, and I don't understand it. But I've listened to him try to explain it, and boy, he needs a new debate coach to go forward on that.
Yeah.
And he's normally very articulate, but talk about unconvincing.
Yeah. Well, and this is the thing. I mean, it's going forward here in the state. It's being pushed by these national organizations who get a ton of money.
Of course.
And at the same time that you've got the top down, these national organizations, you've got the bottom up, which you've got these groups that pop up locally that, these people have been put into office. They agree with these things that come through the National League of Cities and these other groups, and they take up these issues like Oakland. I mean, if you're going to look at a city that's starting to Oakland's terrible. We've talked about them before and how their mayor was at that conference up in Toronto.
Yeah,
and,
climate.
Part of the whole
National
climate
Conference
mayors
of Mayors or something it was.
And so you got Oakland here. And so Oakland doesn't want to, they are pushing. They passed a resolution.
They can't fix a pothole, but they can, they can pass resolutions. Great work by the city council.
Yeah, and they as well have ranked choice voting out there. So yeah, that they're fully on board with trashing the way we currently elect people.
And remember something: this is kind of a byproduct of what we say. If they can't get it at one level, they go to a different level. They can't amend the Constitution, and they know it. They can't get this through Congress, and they know it.
Right.
They're certainly not going to get this through the president, and they know that.
Right.
So what are they doing? Going to cities, opening up a chapter in this state, blah, 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 spreading around their propaganda so they can get it through the back door.
Right. And that's really what ranked choice voting, I believe, does, because it is replacing the current way that we elect people by a majority, and it is giving them a plurality based on some concocted formula, and it supposedly makes it fair, quote unquote. And so you train people in this mindset of having fair elections. And
it's no coincidence they call it fair vote.
Right, and it's not going to stop at local elections until they have it across the board. And I don't mean ranked choice voting, because they do want to keep the two-party thing. They don't want to let the other parties in, the Constitution Party, the Libertarian Party, all those guys. They want to keep it, two parties.
Right. They want Minneapolis, where you've got 8 Democrats to choose from in each ward.
Right, because it assures Democrat control. But nationally, that's too big. So what you have to do is have national popular vote, trust in your cities to deliver the liberal
Churn
vote.
out the...
Yep. And then you control, and you control probably forever because of the nature of cities.
National popular vote, it's done.
You have your people in the cities that are getting enough government benefit, whether that's welfare or whether that is something else,
School money. How much more money are spent on inner city schools, inner city roads, inner city bike paths, inner city sports stadiums.
Right.
Name the topic we've talked about for 110 episodes, and the big cities are getting more than the small cities.
Right.
And if you change the representation, the big cities are going to get bigger, the small cities are going to get smaller.
Absolutely.
Period.
Absolutely. So, that's why we have to look, and why the local angle is the answer to this.
And can I even say something else too? You talk about something like coal mining or something, or mining up in northern Minnesota, and how important that is to the economy up there, and so on. Think of that. Think of if we have a national popular vote, if that had any chance whatsoever. Hey, know what? Hey,
shut them down.
Too bad. Move to Duluth.
Yeah.
Go deliver pizzas.
Yep.
You don't mean anything. We don't got to listen to you anymore because we don't need Minnesota.
Yeah.
We don't need this swing state.
Right.
We don't have to have it. That's going to be the attitude. Is and some of the criticism of the Electoral College is, well, these states are all vote red all the time, or they vote blue. Well, that's not true. Go back to history and take a look.
It's changed so much over time.
How many times? It was not that long ago. Okay, I was alive. I saw Ronald Reagan win New York.
Yeah.
I saw George H.W. Bush win California.
Yeah.
Jimmy Carter won Texas. Okay, it can happen. West Virginia, maybe the most Republican state in the country, was won by Bill Clinton, was won by Michael Dukakis, of all people on the face of the earth. The idea that states, maybe the last handful of elections, it has been a little more polarizing. Then, of course, the purple states are where the money goes.
Right.
But that always changes over time.
Yeah, look back 175 years ago. Before the Civil War, the South was Democrat, the North was Republican.
Yeah, well, and then after the Civil War for the next 50 years too.
Exactly.
Yeah, no, Republicans really didn't pick up the South until Nixon.
Yeah.
They won Eisenhower won some, but ultimately it really was after the Civil Rights Act that things started to change.
Right. It took a generation or so after, people weren't owning slaves anymore for people to have a different mindset.
1920, the first time a solid Confederate state of Tennessee, won by Warren Harding, was won by a Republican. The Civil War generation was dead by then.
Yep.
And just think, the reddest of red states were Massachusetts, Maine, Rhode Island.
Yeah.
The exact opposite of what it is. So the idea, Ronald Reagan won Vermont, Bernie Sanders' home state.
Yeah.
Come on, these things do change over time, and I think they will. You look at things. Take a look at states like Massachusetts, Maryland, Vermont. They all have Republican governors.
Yep.
Don't tell me that Republicans can't win there. Maybe they're not on a national level, but they are. We talk about it locally, going to the state, working their way up. That's how you're going to change it. I just hope that they don't have the short-sightedness to not do that.
Right.
But we've seen states change. I hate to bring up a state like this, but one state that I think is going to be interesting to see what happens is Texas.
Yeah.
It's where I encourage Hispanics to move because they sure like paying no income tax.
Yeah.
So they're a lot more open, and maybe in a state like that. But that's a state where it is swelling in population.
Yes.
They got a great economy there and low taxes, and that's all part of it. You know, if it was all about the weather, then California would be growing at the same rate. Guess what? It's not.
No.
So, you know, but that's a state that could change in the future. Not now, but I mean, their governor won by what, 21 last time? I mean,
Yeah.
he won by a ton. But, I mean, you never know if a state like that is going to switch or not. Then you look at states like we mentioned Missouri before. I mean, that was a real bellwether state, and it's really gone red hard the last I can't remember the last time it went to. Maybe Clinton won it once, but it's just gotten redder and redder. And I mentioned West Virginia mainly because of Democratic environmental policies. But you wonder if what's going to happen with the Rust Belt and whether I said that the hidden issue in 2016 was trade. I said that's the issue nobody's talking about, but. Finally, we have a candidate who I know you and I don't always see eye to eye on trade, but you finally have who has identified losers of trade deals, and you wonder if is it going to go one way once? Is that a trend? Does it? These things are always cyclical, is my point,
Right?
And you can't pin the last couple of elections and say, well, only so many states have switched, so therefore the system's failing. It's also just a function of the two parties and how they're not they're being very short-sighted, I think, in how they're approaching looking at the next election, not looking at the long term like we do.
Right.
So,
Right.
I just think that's a BS argument.
So how do we fix this? I mean, the problem is we're so far down the road right now. We do have to elect people to state level, federal level offices that are going to shut this down. But long term, I mean, we always look out more than just the next election cycle. We're always looking 10, 20, 30 years out, 50 years out, and how to be able to put something in place that is going to last over the long term. And to do that, I mean, we have to look locally. We can't keep just putting people into positions of power and not letting them build from the ground level first.
And I'm going to say something, too. It's not just about electing people. It's about educating people.
Absolutely.
I mean, why do we have an electoral college? What is the purpose? Why was it set up? You know, Civics 101. I mean, back to that. You know, because I feel like it's so misunderstood. And I'm not saying people are stupid, just ignorant. If you look at, I think if you took a poll of, it should be the popular vote or should blah, 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 popular vote might win in some cases. If you talk to people who really get the Electoral College, it's a totally different result. And if you really explain to them, hey, you know, I think if you explain the consequences, people will scratch their heads a little bit about it.
Absolutely.
But I feel like that debate is also missing as well. Where are the proponents of the Electoral College? Where are they?
Yeah. Why are we not hearing their voices? Why is there not a national organization?
Why isn't there a bill in the legislature to do the opposite?
Right.
Why don't they amend their own constitution to prevent this from happening? You know, it just seems like once again, you know, the other side is just, PragerU puts out a video, great. But ultimately, you know, legislation is what's the most important thing. And controlling the debate. And, you know, it's another case where the debate is being lost in my book. But then again, my book's pretty thin. Not a lot of pages in it, so I don't know.
But so I think that we need to get people on the bench. We need to build our farm teams so that we're sending people to St. Paul, in Minnesota anyways, that are very strong on the Electoral College, that they have that education, that background, that understanding.
And before they go there, they are vetted.
Yes.
They're and people who don't, I hate to say, they need to be primaried. And that has to be a central issue. It has to be.
Yeah.
Based on their feelings in the national popular vote. In fact, I don't believe in litmus tests necessarily, but
Yeah.
this is a big one.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'd have a hard time. I had a hard time voting for Karen Housley
Yeah.
just because of this issue.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know.
Yeah, it's a big one.
It's.
Yeah, I'm not a one issue voter either.
I've never had
but
that. Yeah, that's a
yeah,
pretty big issue.
It's a pretty big issue. So we're looking for people. We want people across Minnesota that are willing to step up and start to put themselves in a place where they can make a difference. Whether that's by serving on advisory commissions, whether that is by running for something, or helping people run for something. We need you. There are enough of us in this state to be able to take over a majority of all of these elected and appointed local positions in this state. We just have to find the people to do it. Right now, we're just ceding ground to the Democrats and letting them do whatever they want at the local level, which turns into letting them do whatever they want at the state level because we don't do the right things down in the basement. We build our foundation on faulty ground, and we have to change that. And so to do that, we need you. If you're interested in running for something, if you're interested in volunteering for something at the city, county level, get a hold of us. If you hear about crazy things like ranked choice voting or a resolution to support the state government for national popular vote, you let us know about it. You can do that at commsolutionsmn@gmail.com. That is commsolutionsmn@gmail.com. And we would love to talk with you about it, love to get you plugged in, love to get you on the road to changing and solidifying liberty in this state. So, that said, share this everywhere because a lot of people don't know this. Your friends and your family and your neighbors, they need to know it. They need to hear what's going on. So that's the best thing that you can do. You can share it directly with them, press the share button and send it on. Or even by leaving a comment and a rating, that pushes us up and out to more people so that we can get more eyes on this. So anything you can do to help, we are super grateful because you're not just helping us by doing that. You're helping you. You're helping where you live in Baxter. You're helping where you live up in International Falls. You're helping where you live down in Wabasha. So,
or Zimbabwe.
Or Zimbrota. So, please, just take a step and do something to help your community. We're begging you. We can change this around, but it's got to be you, and it's got to be right now. We're two guys, and we can't do it all from these chairs and these microphones that we got. So, with that said, we're going to go away. We're going to come up with another great podcast for next week, believe you me. But until then, we love you, Minnesota. Now it's your turn to get to work.